Hey friends, welcome back to week 2 of Pandemic Parenting. This week, we welcome back Dr. Jeff Parziale as we get into a conversation around the sudden responsibility to homeschool. There's some among us who have chosen to homeschool our children, and that's awesome and that's great, and the pandemic has introduced some new challenges, but then there's others of us who homeschooling is not something we've chosen, and yet in this season, we find ourselves at home, spending more time with our children, and entrusted to oversee the responsibilities of their education. What do we do with that? And so come join me, Pam, and Dr. Parziale as we navigate a conversation around this topic. And so what I want to do is I want to read through these ideas and then just get a reaction from both of you. If there's something you want to expound on, if there's something you disagree with, it's something to complement. The first one is this: systems and routines matter. They make kids feel safe.
I think in this new pandemic season, we may have to rewrite those routines. So it doesn't make sense to me to keep up the routine you had when they were going to school every day, but that you create for your family your pandemic routine, and then you enforce that consistently. So there needs to be bedtimes, there needs to be school times, there need to be nap times, play times, and meals and those kind of things. So whatever that looks like for your family, it needs to be enforced and it needs to be consistent.
Children will take their theme from us. And so when they see us having a routine and feeling relaxed about that, then they're going to relax too. So that's good.
The second thing to keep in mind is don't try to replicate the classroom experience. You can't.
You can't replicate the classroom because there's not 29 other little people there the same age. So I would say feel free to embrace the pandemic educational experience at home. You can rewrite that based on what it is and what it needs to be for your family. So unless you've chosen to homeschool your children, you're not the teacher. You're the learning coach. I think you just have to know your children and you have to know yourself, and you create that environment for them to learn at home. It could be kind of fun to do schoolwork in a new place. So what's wrong with reading on the bed or doing a science experiment on the table? So just think of the world as your classroom, or your house as the classroom, or your community as a classroom, and just don't try to make it school at home. Just think bigger and broader. And one of the things I wanted to add into this one, Ish, is that parents have come to me and they said, I'm really concerned my child is going to be behind. So will the 29 other children that are home. They will all be behind. Teachers will pick up right where things were left off. So I don't think parents need to put that heavy burden on themselves to make sure the kids are ready for that next grade. And, as an educator, my advice would be make sure your kids are reading. If they can read, they can access all sorts of information. And if you don't get through things in the course of one day, it's okay. When my children were in diapers, I always kind of worried, oh my gosh, how am I going to get them out of diapers and get them potty trained? Well, let me tell you this. They did not go to college in diapers. Over time, they got it. And your children will too. They will get everything that they need.
The third thing here is expect resistance. How can I recognize that? And what can I do about it?
In my profession, resistance means that my goals and the client's goals are different. And so I need to get in alignment with their goals. Their overall goal is to get better, to be less depressed or whatever they came in for, but whatever the presenting issues were. But it's either I'm afraid, I don't want to do it, it looks too hard, I'm not ready to do it. It really doesn't matter. My job as a parent in this situation is to understand that resistance. Now, if it's just behavioral, if it's they don't want to do it, then we're going to deal with that like we deal with any other behavioral issue. But for the most part, I want to align myself with the child. Let's talk about that. Those should be conversations. I think that's, we don't need to get out the ruler. I think we just need to say, let's talk about that. We want this to be a positive experience. We don't want them to hate us or hate learning. I mean, it's one of the things that when I work with parents and teachers, often in the past, it was like, man, make learning fun. Make sure that it's not something that they're going to dread. Because if they love learning, they're going to learn well and they're going to learn a lot. If they don't like to learn, if they think learning that experience is a negative one, they'll resist it all the time.
I've learned in time that sometimes resistance is a way of a child telling me, I'm not ready for this. It's just way over my head. And it wasn't uncommon for me to come back to it later and not push my way through. That destroys relationships. And frankly, the relationship is more important than getting that essay written or whatever. So come back to it later. It might be the next day, it might be the next week, it might be a couple months later, who knows? But don't force it. The second thing I've realized is sometimes resistance is because they don't like to do it. Then how about if we do this after we get done with this essay, or break it into parts? Sometimes we expect them to do too much at once. Find success in doing a portion of it. Then sometimes there's resistance because they're fearful of trying something new, or it's difficult and they're a perfectionist. This is where, you can get your cheerleader outfit on and say, this is a good thing for you and a really good thing for your character to try something that might be a bit hard. When kids accomplish something they didn't think they could, you find that it develops confidence and it develops resilience. Sometimes there's resistance because they just got a crummy attitude. That's a behavior issue. And that needs to be handled like any other behavioral issues, the way you handle other behavioral issues in the home.
Hey, we're having a great conversation so far. Please join us after the break as we jump back into this conversation. But first, a few laughs.
Hey Mom, what's for dinner tonight? I don't know, what do you want? Hey Mom, what's your...
Hey, now walk it out. Now walk it out. Now walk it out. Southern style DJ. Now walk it out. DJ Montana Trap. Walk it out. DJ Southside walk it out.
Thanks for sticking around. Let's jump back into this conversation. Another opportunity in this season to invest in their passions. What are some diagnostics to identify my kids' passions? Once I know what my child's passions are, what's the best way for me to champion that, especially if we're in a season where resources are limited?
I think listening to them, what's fun for them, what they like to do is a way of, I don't think it's going to be that difficult for a parent to really tune into what a child's passions are. These are great conversations. And obviously, some of those things are going to be easy to do from your kitchen, experiments, you've got some things, and some of those things are going to be impossible. If they want to do marine biology, that's going to be a little tough right now. But even then, you can explore at the level of let's go online and understand what's going on with whales or dolphins. I think the key here is about encouragement. I don't think it's going to be tough for a parent to sort of tune into that. I think the key is going to be to encourage that.
It's not hard to identify what they're passionate about because it's what they gravitate towards whenever given the opportunity, whether that's when they're little, it's trains or whatever that is. But the beautiful thing is in the day of Google, you can take virtual tours of museums in Europe. You can tour the White House. You can go to Antarctica. I mean, there's no limit anymore. I have two girls. They're in their 20s now. And my older daughter got an American Girl doll when they had the historical ones. And she really liked Felicity, who was the Colonial Williamsburg doll. And along with this company was so smart. They provided resources to go along with it, the dresses and the outfits and all that. And these resources were like books and, all these kind of stories. And so she loved this whole era. So what she did is she looked up everything she could about Colonial Williamsburg, and she planned a week-long trip for the family there. And she had it marked out what we were going to do in the morning and in the afternoon and the evening and what, where we were going to visit, down to where we were going to eat lunch. A few years later, we went to Williamsburg and we followed her plan and we had a blast.
Mm.
This was something she learned so much about, and I did not have to try to motivate her.
Is there maybe kind of any final thoughts when you think about parents trying to navigate this pandemic season with their children?
So there were a few more educational thoughts that I wanted to talk about. The first is, don't feel constrained by the regular school schedule. You could get everything done by noon easily. If you look at a child's school schedule, there's recess, there's lining up for recess, there's walking to specials, blah, blah, blah. You take all of that away and you probably have a half day of learning. The other thing I wanted to say is I think it's important that you leave room for playtime. Kids need time to be kids. Leave room for their imagination, their creativity. I don't feel like you have to masterminding that for your kids at every point. They can come up with things to do and come up with ways to play. If you are someone who has to work while your kids are at home, I would have to say that's very difficult. And the younger that they are, the more difficult that will be. It just will be. And so you're going to have a lot of flexibility. You'll need to manage expectations. It's not going to be easy, and it may not look as comfortable as you would like it to look. Keep your hands open to what God has, to entrust it to Him, and He will help you put it together.
Just following up that thought of the parent who's trying to be intentional with what little they can give. I heard a preacher once share that where the ideal is lacking, God's grace abounds. If it's what you can give, it's what you can give. The Lord's really sweet. And He's really faithful.
One of the things I would tell a parent is don't stress out about this. I mean, if at the end of this time you've built a better relationship with your children, and you've shared experiences together, and you've shared a little bit about your own childhood, and you guys have enjoyed each other, and you've also let them in a little bit to who you are and what you're all about, especially your faith, then you need to feel really good about that. And you're right, if you are working, that is going to be tough. You've got to create some structure around that. If you don't, it's going to be stressful all the time, which means you may have to set up a room upstairs where it's off limits, and you put a sign up there for the next hour. Dad doesn't or mom doesn't get bothered. I mean, you need to create some structure there, and then you need to build in time to let some of that energy of your own off, but also your children's. And so balancing out those things is going to be important.